Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Uh, in this session, we'll be talking about one of our favorite clients, Lume, which, as some of you may know, is an emerging leader in the whole body deodorant category. I'm joined here by Jeff Strong, who is a senior advisor to Lume and Mammoth Brands, the parent company for Lume, and also our client lead on this engagement, as well as my colleague and chief journey mapper, Greg Tucker. In today's session, we'll be talking about Lume, their brand story, the category challenges that Jeff and his team were faced with that uh, prompted them to reach out to us for partnering in this very important research. So, over the course of the next 15-20 minutes, we'll walk through the background and the history in this category and for Lume, uh, the research strategy and the challenges Jeff and the Lume team were faced with, what prompted this research to happen, the actual insights that were uncovered, the methodologies that we deployed, and really end with the insights and the activation actions that Lume will be taking as a consequence of this important research. So, with that, let's jump in. Greg, if we can go to the next slide, please. Jeff, if you'd like to talk to everyone about your background and how this project got initiated and your story.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Nitin, great to be with you. Hi, everybody. It's fun to be here and share a little bit about this fascinating and insightful journey we had in the APDO category. So, just very briefly, my background: I worked in the CPG industry for 28 years. I spent 21 years at Procter and Gamble. I then moved on from P&G and became the global president, chief customer officer of Johnson and Johnson. And one of the things I had a lot of experience doing is working with retailers to try to do a better job of meeting shopper needs. And so I spent a lot of years working on that at Procter and J&J, and and decided to come back into the industry last year uh, because I met the good folks at Mammoth Brands, and they were interested to kind of pick my brain on how to approach some of these challenges based on my prior background. And so I jumped in, and the first piece of work I did was with our friends at Gold. Now, let me just start by saying what we're talking about here is the antiperspirant deodorant category and a subsegment in that category called whole body deodorant. What whole body deodorant is, in simple terms, is it's deodorant that can be used anywhere in the body, not just armpits. And the visionary behind whole body deodorant is this wonderful OB-GYN named Dr. Shannon Klingman. She was the visionary, and she understood that women have unique odor control needs, and they need products that are safe and effective. And there was nothing in the category that was meeting their needs. So she created Lume Whole Body Deodorant. So Shannon, understanding the unique odor control needs of women, created Lume to meet those needs. Many consumers have significant odor control worries, and many consumers have suffered embarrassing situations due to odor or sweat control issues. What Lume did is they brought a new technology to the category that is safe and effective for all of the needs that women have, no matter where they're applying the product on their body. The key technology is something called mandelic acid. Mandelic acid changes the skin pH so that the odor-causing bacteria can't grow. So it literally stops odor before it starts. That's the benefit that Dr. Klingman brought to consumers, and that's what caused the brand to explosively grow when it was launched several years ago. Greg, let's go to the next slide. This product really can be used anywhere. It's safe and effective, and it can be used anywhere. Greg, let's go to the next slide. So Lume launched several years ago as a DTC native brand online, and immediately they were a huge success. Word of mouth spread. this incredible buzz was created, and the brand took off online. And of course, when that happens, typical conventional retailers, they want it in their stores. And so the phone started ringing, and retailers like Target and Walmart soon picked up the product and put it on the shelves. And the success just continued. And so distribution rolled out across the US. The brand was growing in leaps and bounds, and life was pretty good. In fact, it was so successful that all of the other manufacturers in the APDO category decided to enter with their own whole body products. And so this beautiful place where Lume had existed by itself and was doing great changed very suddenly with the entrance of all these competitive brands in 2024. And so obviously what happened is the explosive growth slowed and then eventually stopped. Sales flattened out, and it left Lume in a position where they were trying to figure out, okay, we've enjoyed this incredible period of a startup, an explosive challenger brand. What do we do now when we've got to compete just like everybody else for the consumer support? And so one of the things that was interesting is that we even though whole body had been really successful, awareness was high, trial was high, there were still about 50% of APDO customers that were likely whole body users that hadn't tried the product. Now, we knew a lot about the upper funnel advertising. It was working well. Awareness was high. Interest in the brand was very high. But something was happening in store that was causing a disconnect, and we didn't know why. We knew the issue was in store. We wanted to understand what's going on in store that's preventing consumers from trying this product when it definitely will meet their needs better. And so we reached out to Gold to get some help. So we knew that less than half of the consumers that should be trying whole body products were trying them. So that told us that something was not working well in store. The advertising was working well in the upper funnel, but when the consumer came into the store, the shop, something was disconnecting. APDO is an interesting category. It's been around a long time. There hasn't been a lot of innovation in the category until recently. In fact, you'd have to go back 18 years to Secret Clinical for the last major innovation before brands like Native and Lume came on the scene a few years ago. And so it's a complex category with lots of SKUs. Consumers tend to be on autopilot. And so they're not deeply engaged in the category. And so retailers, in terms of how they're shelving and merchandising the category, and shoppers, in terms of how they're shopping the category, everybody is kind of on autopilot. And so that works pretty well in general for most consumers. So we knew that something was happening in stores that was a disconnect for that whole body shopper that wasn't trying the product, but we weren't sure exactly what that was. So we reached out to our friends at Gold to get some help.
Thanks, Jeff. So the research strategy, we wanted to employ was really looking in the mass market area and understanding for the different shoppers, how do they shop? Why are they shopping that way? Are they finding their solution? If not, or what's getting in their way? We need to understand it not just about the product or the branding, but what's happening in the aisle, in the shelf, and inside their minds. And we needed to understand it, as Jeff said, what's the difference between whole body deodorant users and those who are considering it, but haven't used it yet. And understand it from their different shopping journeys. Is this a replenishment journey? Is it a new brand consideration journey? Or is this the first time they're buying whole body deodorant? So that drove our research strategy, which had two parts. Qualitative exploration, in this case, going through eye tracking of shoppers going through the aisle and seeing what they looked at, how long they were looking at it, followed by a retail interview. We're asking them detailed questions about their shopping experience and what they considered. And then it was complemented by quantitative insights, an online survey. We gathered all the information so we could quantify the impacts and the statistics that we needed to project out and provide the right advice to Lume. Now, what we found was that there were three segments of the market. as Jeff talked about, there's whole body deodorant users, which made up about 40% of our research. We found that there were people considering whole body deodorant that made up about a third of our research sample. And we found a number of people who just weren't considering it. We wanted to see the difference between those two. What we could really see is that the whole body deodorant users were spending twice as much money on their deodorant needs than a regular person who wasn't buying it. Part of that is they don't have as acute needs or they're not treating their acute needs. And the second part is they're buying a more expensive product. Whole body deodorant products are significantly more expensive. They're more valuable, but they're also more expensive. What we really wanted to know is what was happening as they were going through the shopping experience in their minds. And this is where we activated the eye tracking shopper research.
Well, it was fascinating for me to have a chance to participate in this directly. So I hopped on a plane and I flew to Atlanta, where I met a member of the Gold team, and they have some great methods for getting at the bottom of this path to purchase and where shoppers are experiencing friction. And so the first thing they did is they set up shoppers with eye tracking glasses so that we could see exactly what they were looking at as they went through the shopping experience. Now, let me step back for just a second and tell you a couple of things that were interesting for me as a business person participating in the research. It was very clear to me there were two different kinds of shoppers. So the first type of shopper was the shopper that was habitual, the shopper that was on autopilot. These shoppers tend to be buying legacy brands, right? So this is a mature category. It's been around for a long time. Consumers understand it. They've habituated in their shopping behaviors, and those shoppers' needs are generally being quite well met. The other shopper, though, is this whole body shopper, right? That shopper that has acute odor and sweat control needs. They're not on autopilot. They're looking for better solutions. They need information. They need guidance. They need help. And those shoppers are not having a great experience because those extra things they need in order to get comfortable to buy the product aren't available at shelf. Here's how it plays out when you look at it through eye tracking. So the first thing that happens is all shoppers have kind of habituated to start in the strike zone. So in the case of women's products, the number one brand in the category is Secret. The number two brand in the category is Dove. Those two brands, as you can see from this visual, anchor the category, and that's where all the shoppers start in the strike zone. Now, for a lot of consumers, those legacy shoppers that are on autopilot, they find what they need in the first couple of steps. Step 1, 2, 3, they buy the product and they're on their way. But for that whole body user, the one with acute needs that's looking for more information or guidance, they start to scan upward. They move to number 4, number 5, number 6. They're looking for more information. And then they move to the left, still in that scan mode. They're still searching for a product that might better meet their needs. And then if they don't find it, then they come back down to the strike zone. Sometimes they even cascade to the bottom shelves looking for the price brands that are down there to see if anything might interest them. And so if they find what they need, they buy. If they don't find what they need, they run the full cycle, and they may exit the aisle without ever having made a purchase. And so briefly, just talking about that whole body user, the key thing that was very clear from the research was that when they start to scan up at steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, if there's not something there that captures their attention, guides them to the product, and then gives them good information on what the product features and benefits are, they just won't engage. They'll fall back into the strike zone, maybe buy a legacy brand, maybe not, and then exit the category. I just want to share one little anecdote that really illustrates this well. So I was actually standing in the aisle trying to be, inconspicuous with a baseball cap and some sunglasses. And a woman that was one of our shoppers came into the aisle, and she followed this pattern very consistently. She started in the strike zone. Her gaze then moved up to the top shelf, and it looked like to me she was looking right at Lume, which is right behind that number 6. And I thought, okay, well, is she gonna buy the product? She didn't. Her gaze moved to the left, back down to the middle, and then she left the aisle without making a purchase. So, exhibiting the pattern. Well, we interviewed her in the Subway sandwich shop after the shopping experience, and the gold researcher that was leading the research asked her a really interesting question. She had come in pre-screened as a whole body curious shopper. So we were both kind of wondering, well, since she was whole body curious, why didn't she even reach up and pull Lume off the shelf and check it out? And so the researcher said, hey, have you heard of this brand called Lume? And she said, oh, yeah, I love that brand. I'm anxious to try it. Had it been on the shelf today, I would have bought it. Now, that product was no more than 12 to 18 inches from the end of her nose. She was looking right at it, but she didn't see it. So that helped me understand, okay, even though the product is on the shelf, consumers aren't necessarily seeing it if they're looking for something in particular, and there isn't some collateral or asset on the shelf to guide them to the right product and get them to engage. And so what my friends at Gold would call that is they would call that a point of shopping friction, right? The shopper's on a mission looking for what they need, and the current shelf is not meeting their needs, and it's creating friction for them that prevents them from buying. That was the biggest takeaway that I got from the research in Atlanta, is there are points of friction for these whole body users, and if we don't address them, then trial rates will continue to be suppressed and the brand won't grow.
Jeff, that is such a great example, and thank you for sharing that with the viewers. So many times when we work with other CPG or retail brands, everyone knows that there is brand switching happening at the shelf level, but a lot of times people are just shocked when we come back and tell them that it's north of 70, 80, even 90%. And what you experienced, Jeff, firsthand was how easy is for that friction to occur and for brand switching to also then shape up and happen, that ultimately impacts not just revenue numbers, but also is a big contributor towards sales leakage. And so, that is also something I want to highlight for our viewers. This is also why, we recommend to clients in really doing this type of effort in store, in collecting insights in real time. Imagine doing this just as an online survey. There is no way we could have uncovered this insight.
No, for sure.
Exactly. And, the way in the conversations following this, we actually wanted to staple ourselves to that decision process, but we wanted to do it in the context. So the quantitative analysis identified that there are routine shoppers that Jeff had mentioned, the autopilots, and there are a number of people who are actively looking for benefits on the shelf that simply can't find it, and as well as new features or new products. And when we interviewed them, we found that the autopilots had their habitual buying pattern. They were relatively unengaged, like Jeff mentioned earlier, but they were still encountering a little friction, but they were still not investing in trying to get any type of better solution. They just weren't thinking about it. But we found a whole new type of segment, which are the explorers. They really have a problem. They're absolutely out there looking for a better solution. They're engaged, but they're frustrated along the way. We see for them, their brands, they continue to switch brands looking for that solution, not quite wondering whether or not they have it. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, we actually asked what percent of people feel like they can't get the information at the store to make the deodorant decision they really wanted. Like the woman Jeff saw, who was struggling making that decision, but she just couldn't find it. And we found that that was more than half of all shoppers in a large sample survey. And what they needed was more options, hard to find the right product, not enough messaging, out of low inventories, out of stocks. So there's a number of friction problems that they were running into that was getting in their way. And this is not for 5 or 10%, but this was impacting more than, in this case, 56% of the market. Now we did ask people, how frustrating was it? And this turns out to be overall a relatively frustrating shopping experience. As we see different categories, 35% being frustrated with their shopping experience is a pretty high number for any type of CPG category. But when we break that down between those who are not considering whole body deodorant, it was less. If they're not considering it, it's a relatively easy buy. If you're buying just your regular deodorant of a brand you trust, it's really a low friction situation. If you're considering whole body deodorant, it starts moving up. And if you're a user or even a lapsed user, it's even much more than that. So we were seeing that whole body is a high friction environment, and we could see it in the aisle through the eye tracking process, and we could see it in our survey data. Past gold research has identified that every time you have more frustration, your brand switching, even at the lowest level of friction, goes up by twice as much. At the highest level, goes up by 5 times as much if you're highly frustrated. So if you're a brand, and you're trying to hold on to your customers and you're not satisfied and they're running into friction, you're going to lose them 5 times more than if they don't run into friction. And this is really the challenge of this category, not just any specific brand in there. And when we model the difference between existing category sales and potential category sales for that entire aisle, we saw that there was an opportunity to increase it by more than 50% by addressing the needs of the shoppers who were running into friction and were being frustrated through their experience, which is a pretty big, any type of growth like that is pretty big in any category for a mass market company, much less the deodorants section. So we boil that down into 3 types of leakage opportunities. The first is category leakage, which is it could be 50% bigger. We're just not dealing with it because the shoppers are not getting the answers to their questions to buy the right brand. They're switching brands and still not being happy with that. And we're looking at the changes to the aisle and shelf redesign and education that could deal with improving the category leakage. Also, channel leakage is a problem. Up to a quarter of the shoppers that encountered friction said they would leave the store and go to another channel to buy the product that they were looking for. So this is of concern to the Walmarts and the Targets of the world who say, look, I need to solve this, otherwise I'm losing the customer. So the overall idea is that there's a huge category growth opportunity, and there's retaining the customers inside the store for the channel partners. And what needed to be done was a rethinking of the overall category and the aisle display to actually keep the shoppers in the store and solve their needs. And that's where the research came out. So Jeff, could you tell us a little bit about just activating the research needs, what Lume was considering, and what you think that channel partners like Walmart or Target should be considering?
Sure thing, Greg. Happy to do that. Let me just anchor in the most critical thing we learned from the work. We got this wonderful insight that there are actually 2 different shoppers that have very, very different needs. You've got that legacy shopper, and they're on autopilot, and you've got to meet that need. And the category is doing a great job. The shelving concepts or the planograms that are in use now are doing a great job of meeting that shopper need. But you also have this whole body or multi-product user shopper, and they have very, very different needs. They're not on autopilot. They need engagement, they need information, they need benefit communication. And so the key thing is you've got to be able to meet both shopper groups' needs in order to grow the category the way that it could grow. So we now know the issue, we have the insights, and so we're now preparing to engage with retailers so that we can work together to solve the problem. Now it's not an easy fix, right? We have to be creative, we have to be innovative because we've got to keep the legacy shoppers happy. We have to deal with the operational constraints of the store. We can't do things that are operationally not wise or not sound. And we need an and solution that meets the needs of both shopper groups. So we're excited to have the chance to engage retailers, explore the insights, and work together to come up with a solution that will drive the category harder.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Greg. Um, we are super excited about the insights that this research uncovered. And in a closing message to our viewers, what I also wanted to share was as we think about legacy shoppers, not just in this category, but in any category, it really comes down to what is the effort that a brand has taken in really understanding the journey, the friction points, the moments of truth that shoppers in that particular category are encountering every day, not just in retail, but also shopping in an omni-channel world. And that is where leaders like Lume and Mammoth Brands emerge, where if they've taken the time to really understand the friction points and work on removing those friction points, there are no surprises that soon a lot of shoppers will now become legacy Lume and legacy Mammoth brand shoppers, where they'll walk into retail stores and they will have blinders on just for Lume and Mammoth brands and ignore other competitors. That's the advantage of doing work like this, where if you can staple yourself to your target customer and uncover insights as rich as what Lume and Mammoth uncovered, then all of a sudden, not only are you the leader in that category, but you are also the preferred partner for retailers like Walmart and Target. So, thank you all for taking time out to view this content. I hope this was useful for you. And thank you again for your time.